Tomáš, thank you very much. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure for me, and it's a great privilege for me to be the host tonight. Well, ladies and gentlemen, let me start not in 1990, but in late 60s, in 1967. I mean, what was the main reason or the circumstances of the breakup between Czechoslovak Socialist Republic and the State of Israel? Michal, would you be so kind and start? Briefly.
I'll try to be brief. Thank you very much. It's an embarrassing feeling to be one of the last living eyewitnesses, but it happens to me more and more often, so I'm getting used to it. I mean, the simple for the breakup of the relations, which also meant that the embassy of Israel, which was around the corner in Warszawska, was then empty for the next 20 years, was the 6 Days War in June 1967, when the Soviet Union decided, in the face of humiliating defeat of the Arab armies equipped with Soviet and Czechoslovak arms, decided to retaliate by severing diplomatic relations with Israel. But as some of you remember, it was an interesting time domestically in Czechoslovakia because events were brewing before the Prague Spring of 1967, and especially at the Fourth Congress of the Union of Czechoslovak Writers in June 1967, some courageous writers not only protested against the rule of the Communist Party in Czechoslovakia, but also against this act of breaking diplomatic relations with a friendly country. And as a consequence, a number of writers who participated in the Congress, Arnošt, Lustig, and several others, ended up in Israel in 1968 after the Soviet invasion. Some of them stayed there and lived there. Our honorary consul in Jerusalem, what was her name? Tatiana Hoffman was one of those emigres from 1967. So it was an event that was remembered not only for what was happening in the Middle East, but also for what happened back home.
And let's skip or let's jump to 1990 now, Michal, if you want to continue.
Yes, I want to continue.
No doubt.
Well, it's Václav Havel in his New Year's speech dedicated a paragraph to his foreign policy priorities, and among the foreign policy priorities was to invite the Dalai Lama of Tibet to Prague, to invite Pope John Paul II to Prague, and to establish or re-establish relationships with two countries, Israel and the Vatican. Yeah? And he was as good as his word. Already, I think on the 9th of February 1990, the Israeli Foreign Minister Moshe Arens came to Prague. Havel received him in the musical room of the Prague Castle, and he signed the documents on the re-establishment of the relations with Foreign Minister Dienstbier, and that was the second act of this wonderful story. Donald Trump would say beautiful story, but most beautiful.
Do you really need to quote him tonight? No, I'm sorry.
No,
I'm sorry.
Okay.
It's up to you.
And then there was the sad act that was just as important 2 months later, on the 25th of April. Havel with a large delegation, which included many ministers, many officials of the Prague Castle, and our new ambassador to Israel, Mr. Poyar the Senior, traveled to Israel at the invitation of President Herzog. And there is a moment that quite a few people I know shared on that occasion or on other occasions. The first time you fly to the Holy Land and the first time the plane comes from the sea and you see the shoreline and you know that you're landing in Israel. It's, for some reason, it's a very emotional moment.
Was it during a day?
No, it was.
I remember it during the night, so it's
early in the morning. It
early
was,
morning.
but it was already. It was 6 o'clock or so in the morning, so we already saw the shoreline. We landed and we went into a whirlwind of talks with President Herzog, with Prime Minister Shamir, with the leader of the Labour Party, Shimon Peres, and with quite a few others. And the day ended up with a dinner, a state dinner offered by President Herzog. And that is a moment I would like to dwell a few seconds on, because we didn't quite understand what was happening. I mean, there was the dinner, and there were people who were exchanging little notes and whispering into each other's ears, and very, very excited about something, but the something was not Václav Havel or us, or it had not anything to do with us. And the point that we discovered only later was that we were witnessing a historic moment in Israel's history. The moment is called, I think, Hatar Gil HaMasriach, or the stinking maneuver in English, and it was an attempt of Shimon Peres and his allies to depose Prime Minister Shamir in the middle of his term, and it was an attempt that failed. And the funny...
And in the middle of the dinner as well?
At the end of the dinner, it was over. It was already failed. But the funny thing was that we had meetings with both Shamir and Peres earlier in the day, and they didn't let anything on. But so that was it. The other memorable moment for me was Havel's speech at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem on the occasion of his receiving an honorary degree there. And he dedicated, in my mind, it's one of his most beautiful speeches. It's a speech about Franz Kafka and about Václav Havel and why he has felt all his life out of place, and the higher he goes, the less confident he is, and the lower he goes, the better he feels about it, etc., etc. It was a wonderful speech about the Jewish feeling of insecurity that Havel shared, although he was not Jewish himself, as we know, and that, I think, we paradoxically enjoyed, we who were with him, a little more than the audience in Jerusalem, because the feeling of insecurity is something that the majority of modern Israelis decided to leave back in Europe. They, it didn't. Maybe not, but it was in the ethos of the founding of Israel, that, you know, we will not feel insecure anymore. And so we went to Kfar Masaryk, to the kibbutz. There was a big meeting of Czechoslovak Jewry, some of whom lived in Israel for years, some of whom came from the United States, some of whom came with us from Czechoslovakia. And there was one moment when I was about to come here today, I looked up the schedule of the official visits to Israel, and it lists all the items I just mentioned, and it's curiously silent on one moment of the visit. It says the president took a tour of the old city of Jerusalem in the company of a distinguished professor of history, but in fact this was Havel's attempt to negotiate the peace in the Middle East forever after, because we went to the East Jerusalem, to the Orient House, which was then the center of the Palestinian activities in Jerusalem, to meet with the Palestinian officials and to tell them that from now on there would be peace in the Middle East. I mean, you know how that worked, and so. But it was a beautiful visit, beautiful story, and I will never forget about it.
Ambassador Aznauri, do you want to add something? Maybe. Yes, thank you.
Something disappointing, because the last visit of President Pavel was, as you remember, in a very different situation. First of all, apropos insecurity, it's all around. But if you would go on a normal year to a normal state dinner in Israel, even without this dubious political event, it looks like a typical Jewish bar mitzvah. Everybody is talking with everybody. It doesn't resemble a state visit at all, never. I don't know, did you have a chance? I think that's very typical of us.
Okay, thank you. Jiří, do you want to add something? Because we've been talking about President Herzog. I think you have to mention. I mean, President Herzog Senior.
Yeah. Yeah, we have two senior, junior couples here tonight, not Poyars, but also Herzogs.
Yes.
The father of the current Israeli president, Chaim Herzog, paid a visit to Czechoslovakia then. I think it was equally important, and for the Czech citizens, I think even more visible. And it was quite symbolic. And I remember this because following that I was a member of the Czechoslovak parliament at that time, and I remember we were assigned to pay a visit as a parliamentary delegation, which never occurred. And maybe that was one reason, this unfulfilled dream to go there officially, which led me to the position of ambassador later on. I don't know, but that was the first encounter. I would like to make a remark about this segue you suggested by starting with 67. I consider that very important because not only for Havel, who was, by the way, at this writers' conference, which was protesting against it, but there were many other people for whom there was a kind of emotional solidarity with Israel during the Six-Day War. Making parallels, saying, look, I mean, Israel defended itself. We should have done it in 1938. There were parallels with Munich, a lot of parallels, historical parallels. And then in 1968, with the Prague Spring, many of those people paid visits to Israel, not only as emigrants after the invasion, but before. There was a group of people who were there during the summer, and they actually were forced to stay because of the invasion. And if you would look on the list of these people who were there in the kibbutzim, these people were the leaders of the Velvet Revolution. So it didn't come from the heaven, I mean, to Havel's had, it was just in the air among these people who thought this is unjust, it has to be corrected. And this kind of emotional link from their formative years of 67, 68, and that was the generation of 67, 68, was very important. And I realized that when there was a visit of Peter Pithart in his position of the President of the Senate, because he was a part of this group, and he was very much influenced by that spirit. So people sometimes asking, why Czech Republic? Where comes this kind of emotional link? There are many sources, but one of them for this generation was 67.
Thank you for mentioning it. Tomáš, do you want to add something? Please take this microphone.
By the way, Peter Pithart was there also in 1968 with the delegation.
Yes,
of those.
he mentioned that.
But I wanted to also say one more anniversary, or exactly 98 years ago, these days, or this day, Masaryk was in Egypt on his way to Israel, to the Holy Land. So in 2 years, we should celebrate the 100 years anniversary of that.
Okay, let me now ask Veronika to Israel. Once again, good evening. And let me jump to current situation and current relations. How would you describe not the political relations between Czechia and Israel at that time, but I mean the human relations or the social relations or perception of our country in Israel?
I would say the perception of Czechia in Israel is incredibly good. Everywhere I go, I'm surprised first that people know where Czech Republic lies, that it exists, and that people like Czech Republic. Very many Israelis visited, especially Prague, but also other places. Now, during the war, it was one of the countries where the connection was never interrupted, so there were direct flights every day. So people were coming to get some rest from the war. And many people, even like normal people in the streets, not just professors or diplomats, are aware that Czechia is supportive of Israel, that we are friends. And it's not just words, it's what they feel and believe. So it's very, very pleasant to see this in Israel, basically all over the country.
And are they asking you where are the sources of this strong relations? Why are we such a real and strong ally of current and, let's say, current fighting Israel?
They are asking, and it's very difficult to find the answers. And beside what was said already, which I agree with, there is the older connection from President Masaryk to Israel. As Tomáš said, he visited in 1927 the Holy Land, the issue. But also, I believe his intellectual discovery that anti-Semitism is wrong, that Jews are nice people, and his defense of Hilsner, it all contributed towards the national understanding of the Jews in Czechoslovakia. When Masaryk became a father figure of the Czech nation, also his beliefs on Israel, I think, became a kind of part of the national soul, national tradition. And with Havel being directly seen as a follower of Masaryk, this connection was revived as well.
I hope that the noise was from some kitchen, from some kitchen or the okay, yes.
I just
Anna, please.
wanted to add
yes,
something
of course.
which Veronika would not add, that today, Israelis are much more sensitive after October 7 to who, in general, we are quite self-centered, but after October 7, we are incredibly sensitive about who likes us, who dislikes us, whether we are welcome somewhere. And Veronica's activities after October 7 were one of the causes for the fact that Israelis know about the Czech support, and there was even a manifestation next to the embassy to say thank you, which Israelis don't do normally.
You mean in front of Czech embassy in Tel Aviv?
In Tel Aviv.
Anna is very kind, but all my predecessors were also part of this same line of thinking and support of Israel.
Michal, yes.
Just a small addition to that, we've all been asked about this when we served in Israel. And I sometimes tried to explain that it's something that goes back for a long time, even before Masaryk, even before the Hilsner affair, that basically after the Josephinian reforms at the end of the 18th century, the situation of Jews in the country was somehow better than in the surrounding countries. It's not that there was no anti-Semitism, there was, but it was not the virulent kind of anti-Semitism in some of the countries to our east. It was more in the form of sniping and jokes, etc., etc. And over the decades, there emerged a number of people who we recognize not only as a part of the Jewish tradition, but also as a part of the Czech tradition. People like Gustav Mahler, to an extent Sigmund Freud, but certainly Karel Poláček, František Jiří Langes, and quite a few others who are our own as much as they are part of the Jewish legacy. And this is something that binds us together.
I think Kafka is the same.
Franz Kafka
is the same origin. Yes. Let me ask you once again, because you have mentioned it, Michal. What was your first impression, Jiří and Tomáš, after arriving to Israel in the role of ambassador? What was the first private or personal something? I don't want to hear some intimacies, but I mean your real inner feelings.
I should have expected that question, but I was feeling like in a dream. I was extremely young as ambassador. As you pointed out even before this session. Yes, I was at the time extremely young, that's why I'm still sitting with you. And so I felt, am I going to manage this? Because this is a huge, the shoes of the Tomáš's father were quite big. Because he actually marked all the, things important. So what I did is in Israel, you're not that strict on protocol. So I came before I arrived. I came on the visit, and I visited important people with Tomáš's father as an acting ambassador, and I was trying to fulfill what is expected from the successor. That was my first impression, and. Generally, I came in a time of the hype of hope. It was after signing, the peace treaty, two peace treaties, Washington Law and peace with Jordan. High expectations, extremely high expectations. And in less than 1 hour, less than 1 year, Prime Minister Rabin was dead. He was killed 500 meters from the embassy. So we've been witnesses of the history in the worst sense. And you wouldn't believe, but during my tenure for 4 years, I experienced 4 prime ministers. So it's nothing new in Israel, I mean, this kind of sequence. And so I even experienced Bibi the First.
Because he was after, there were after Rabin, there was Shimon Peres for some small period, and then Netanyahu. Am I right? Yes. Michal, yes.
Just to connect the dots, you know, I was present in the White House Rose Garden when Rabin shook very reluctantly, I must say, hands with Yasser
like that, yes.
So I was there on that historic moment, and incidentally, it was exactly the same place where Donald Trump yesterday delivered his speech on the trade sanctions against the rest of the world. So
what's wrong with the place?
I don't know.
Tomáš.
Well, I came first time on 17th of September 1990 with my mother and my sister on the direct flight from Ostrava. Okay, so it was
from Ostrava.
From Ostrava,
really,
with furniture, which was furniture for the embassy and the residence, which was at the end at the embassy at that time. It was Jiří who bought the residence on behalf of the government during his term. So at that time we were living in the 90s before his term. We were living at the embassy. There actually our living room or the dinner table was in the room where I then had my office 20 years later. Yes, and it was extremely hot. Yes, and at that time, it was those Czechoslovaks who came to Israel right before the war, or during the war, or after, or in 1968 or after, they were still quite strong and alive. It was a large community of those still working or early pensioners, so they were quite influential, and they were quite young at that time, okay? So when I came 20 years later, I came to the country which I knew, because I was visiting, not only that I lived there when my father was there, but I visited every year besides 1999, and maybe 1998. There were 1 or 2 years I didn't visit. Every other year I visited at least for a few days, and sometimes for a month. So I came to the country where I had a lot of friends, some family friends, some friends of my parents, and of course many friends of my parents and of my father. They passed away in those 20 years. So that was the change between 1990 and 2010 when I arrived as ambassador. But I must say that I came to a country which I at that time knew quite well. So I really can't say that when I came as ambassador that there would be like some real surprises. But what is not surprising on Israel that every day if you go somewhere around the country, you always find something new. Something new or something very old, but it's always like adventure, and you are never bored.
Thank you. Well, we are now celebrating 35 years since the re-establishment of our diplomatic relations. But what are, Veronika, what are the real current diplomatic relations like? How often do discussions or some consultations take place between our two countries? I hope it's not classified information.
It's definitely not classified, and I would like to add something to your previous question, because when I arrived for the first time as ambassador to Israel, it was my dream fulfilled. This is where I always wanted to work, and I had a lot of plans what we can do together. And it was September 2023, and then October 7 came, and everything has changed. And Israel, as for the diplomatic contacts and diplomatic discussions, there are many, but Israel, as everybody knows, is an informal country. So it doesn't happen that two people meet in a room, they sit and talk diplomatic niceties. It usually happens on WhatsApp or Signal, as the discussions of President Trump and his associates. It happens in very brief meetings over coffee. The visits in the modern technology time are not so necessary, but we are, I think the Czech officials and Israeli officials of different levels are very much in daily touch. Tomáš is one of them, discussing issues that are of bilateral importance, but also broader of international organizations, other countries, help to Ukraine, relations to the United States. This is all. It all shows that we are not just two countries with diplomatic relations, but two countries that know that can do very many things together, either officially or unofficially, either on surface or somewhere deep in the network of the underground.
Yes, Tomáš, do you want to add something? As an
what has changed, and Veronika partly mentioned that, in the 1990s, there were few phones to call and the radio connection, and now really it is an online connection non-stop. So you probably don't know, but I talked to your minister on Saturday or on Sunday. You know, so very well informed. It's surprising for the Israelis to share these like news. Okay, but I told to Veronika, of course, but it's quite easy, and I can communicate now because of my 35-year experience with Israel with several members of Israeli government, like online on WhatsApp and other people. So it's really something which the world from that point of view has changed, and the diplomacy itself has changed, because the uniqueness of diplomats and ambassadors as messengers of communication, or as channels of communication between the two kings and countries, it's partly disappeared, because there is like enormous many other opportunities how people can like talk together, and they don't need the governments and the ambassadors and the embassies.
And the horses and the yes, of course.
Say it aloud. 1 hour jobs. I wanted to tell something which is completely not secret, but it's like confidential. One of the things which I usually do is disturbing people in the foreign ministry of Czechia, in order, usually on a weekend, preferably, either in the evening or on a weekend, on Saturday as well, in order to make them, it's always incredible nonsense, but it usually has to do either with the Foreign Affairs Committee of the European Union. It meets always on Monday, which means that some rumors that something bad is going to happen to Israel on the next meeting always comes on a weekend. So I disturb quite consistently people in the foreign ministry on irregular hours. I don't think any of our colleagues are doing it like we do, but that's part of the thing. And speaking about not needing ambassadors, Veronika is...
Veronika is needed, of course.
No, Veronika is also always in touch with my headquarters director.
Okay. Well, you can continue. Does it mean that you are disturbing them with some nonsenses or with some very, very important news?
It's important for us. It's important.
Nonsense for us sometimes.
It's important for us because we defined it as important. It's another. Well, when you had in the European Union this wonderful guy named Borrell. Every month he wanted to do something against Israel. So we always were on the side of trying to prevent, and Czech Republic almost always helped us with these things. To tell you that it's very dramatic, not necessarily, but...
Jakub, diplomacy, as every profession, has some professional rules, and one very basic rule that one learns early on, and that we use is no task is too unimportant for an ambassador. So,
okay. How important for Israeli ambassador and for Israeli government is Czech government as an ally? I mean, I will ask absolutely openly. How are you observing the Czech political scene and the Czech political situation before our elections, which will take part this year? Is it possible to ask this question? I want to.
Do you want me to give you the result?
No, not the result. Not the result, but yes, if you know it, of course. But I'm not asking you, of course. I'm asking Anna now. Maybe might know better, of course. But I'm asking you, how deeply are you observing the situation and referring to Israel? Nothing will happen if there is some change. I mean, if nothing will change in Czech-Israeli relations, because I hope it will be like that.
Listen, probably I observed your internal political situation less deeply than my colleagues in other countries, because there is a difference between governments of Czech Republic, but mostly the support is there. Probably, I think that the main issue for us would be the change of national security advisor. That's very inconvenient, but otherwise it's not as deeply important issue as it is in a country where one political side is supportive of Israel, another political side is unsupportive of Israel. I have to admit that we have good relations not only with the current coalition.
Of course, but I remember one Israeli ambassador to Prague. It was in 2013, before presidential elections, and he told me, "Well, it's great. Karl Schwarzenberg is a great friend of Israel, and Miloš Zeman is a great friend of Israel too. We are absolutely cool. It's okay." So, do you feel in the same ways connected to some politicians? I mean, to some potential prime ministers.
To be diplomatic.
Yes, of course. Okay. I expect it.
And I do think that there is a difference between people in how much emotion, pro-Israeli emotion they have.
Of course.
But I don't see this tragic
change between some potential prime ministers. Am I right?
Yeah.
Tomáš, do you want to add something or no?
I think Israel should watch generational change, because there is a generational change here, but it's not about I wouldn't be worried if I was an Israeli ambassador about next years. I would be worried about the situation in 15 or 20 years from now, but I think the next government, no matter what it's going to be, then it will be the most sympathetic government to Israel in Europe again. Maybe less than this one, based on personalities, but basically in the level of the sympathies, definitely that would be the case. I hope that Mr. Kavan will not get back to any position, and those people, but otherwise it should be. Oh, he's still alive.
Yeah, no, I know.
Working with Iranians these days.
Yes, okay. So, Jiří,
there would be, okay, you can have some individuals, which I can imagine that they can get some important positions who would not be friendly to Israel, but overall I think that the government would be, okay? The government, like next government. But the government in 10, 15 years, because of generational change, it can be different.
Mr. Kavan, do some of you remember? Well, Jiří, you want to add something? Yes.
Yeah. as opposed to years when I was their ambassador, I think now the relations are, you know, such broad, reflecting relations from science, from academia, from business, various sectors, then it's really difficult for any government to disregard these, I mean, these interests which are there. I mean, it's much more vested interest based relations. My second remark is something which Ambassador cannot say, but this is you need two to tango. And it very much depends what kind of government we will have in Israel as well. Because sometimes the government of Israel is not making it easy for those who support Israel. I mean, I can say it because I'm out of this business.
You're absolutely right, thank you. I'm sorry for the phone, it was my son, I'm very sorry. Yes, that's a good question because, yes, Tomáš?
When 98 years ago, Tomáš Garrigue Masaryk was in Jerusalem, then he was guided through the streets of Jerusalem by Rabbi Sonnenfeld, who was the anti-Zionist rabbi, and someone who you wouldn't find here in the Czech lands. He was from Topolčanky or Topolčan, yeah, from one of so there it was like more common. So you can get to, I don't think in 15 or 20 years, but in 30 years there may be a Czech president guided by another ultra-Orthodox rabbi in Jerusalem again.
Maybe, yes.
It's just worrying, I understand for you, but so that can happen.
Veronika, do you want to add something on this topic? Be so kind, please.
Well, it's difficult. It's difficult to add. I agree that the next government we will have will most likely be sympathetic to Israel on a similar level. And I also am worried about the youngest generation, the generation that goes to Erasmus, to Western universities, learns the ideas there, and without deeply understanding, they just believe that what they talked about drinking beer somewhere in Amsterdam or Paris or Madrid, that is very cool. So we have to find ways how to bring those people into our midst.
Okay, Michal.
I can't help it, but I will say something a little controversial. Following up on what Tomáš said, that and Jiří, that it always depends on both the governments and their policies. And we are very lucky and very, I think, happy on both sides that we have had a very strong, very successful bilateral relationship over the last 30 years. But it does not always hold for our relationship to third countries. Yeah? And over the years we have had some minor differences of opinion with the Israeli government over their position towards Russia, towards the Russian expansionism, etc., etc. And we understood what our Israeli friends have always explained to us, that, you know, they are living in a very sensitive place in the Middle East, and that they have to be watchful of having good relations with people and governments on both sides of an issue like the Russian-Ukrainian issue, etc., etc. But, you know, when it comes to voting in the United Nations, you know, we regularly take flag in this country for voting in support of Israel, yes, on a number of resolutions. Yeah. And I understand it would not be easy.
Among other 9 or 10 countries, to be honest.
4 islands and few countries.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. Yeah. Thank you.
And I understand it is not easy for the Israeli diplomats to to vote on resolutions condemning the Russian aggression against Ukraine, but to vote against it with North Korea, Russia, and the Trump administration, I must say, that I think should have been handled a little differently. You could have abstained.
I will defend you.
Maybe Anna should do it herself, and
She can do.
okay.
No. I'll let you afterwards to defend us. But first of all, I agree with you, and I
But
should.
try to explain it to us.
I will. It's very easily explainable. It was Trump who was introducing something very quickly. We're in the middle of negotiation on our hostages, and we had to do it. And then our current Minister of Foreign Affairs said our stance on territorial integrity of Ukraine didn't change. But I want to say something good about the Russians for a change. Those who know me, I know that I don't. I think, usually. But in a way, on one issue, on one country named Iran, I think the current Russian war helped our positions to come closer. And I think that at a certain point, the Israelis will understand that Ukraine issue for you is like Iran issue for us, but we came closer because of the Iranian supplies to Russia and so on. Now defend me.
But I'm sorry, I want to end that Ukraine is our ally and Iran is not your ally. So it was just a slight difference between.
Ukraine is also our
Of
ally.
course, I know, I'm sure.
I was ambassador in Ukraine.
I know that, and I'm sure. Tomáš, do you want to?
No, I wanted just to let you know that Israel was under a very brutal pressure. Okay? And if Israel didn't vote like this...
From the United States?
From the United States. And if Israel didn't vote like this, then it would be seen in the deliveries of arms to Israel. So this is the world we are living today. Okay?
Michal, do you want to... you brought this topic in here, so please, could you conclude it?
Look, I know there's an explanation, and I understand the reasons for the explanation, but as a practicing diplomat, I would say you can always abstain or not be there.
Veronika, you don't agree? You don't agree with Michal now?
I understand Michal, but I don't agree with him. I think there are times when your most important ally is pressing you to do something, and it's not. You should not vote for it. You have to vote against, and then your decision is whether you do it, and if, as Tomáš said, the support continues, or if you decide to do something else, and there is a different future. I must say, an important minister in the Israeli government told me that Donald Trump is like a waterfall. You cannot pedal upstream. But when you pedal downstream, you can find the place where you land. So this is the way I think Israel had to deal with this revolution.
If Israel was not at the time of the voting in the midst of fighting, then it would be different. But Israel was in the midst of fighting, and the threat was directly linked to that fighting at that moment. So I think we have to have this empathy for that. And I think that Israel could have shown more empathy to our fight or support of Ukrainians and resistance to the Russians in the last 2 years. It had many more chances to show that than this one where I would defend Israel.
I'm sure that Michal has the empathy too, but he has a strange feeling, as I see. You don't want to add anything more, Michal, to that? But why not? You have a freedom of speech.
I just want to add the obvious. I mean, does happen
in the diplomacy or
course of your diplomatic career, that countries are telling another country what will happen if they don't do something. And the question always is how much of that is posturing and how much of that would be delivered as a threat. And I must say that with this particular US administration, I'm not clear about the
Okay. I think that Anna will thank you for the advice for the future, how to deal with Trump administration. And okay, let's we have some more 25 minutes, so let's switch to the current situation in Israel. Veronika, how would you describe the current situation in Israel for a man who wants to come there for a visit, for a holiday, and every day he could read, well, it's a very, very, very difficult situation. This is not safe country, not safe place. So how would you describe the actual situation in Tel Aviv or in big Israeli cities?
Israel is a beautiful country as always, and I tell to all my friends to come to visit. The only difference between now and any other time is that there are less tourists. So the places you want to see won't be crowded and will be more beautiful to enjoy. Of course, there are sometimes rocket alarms nowadays, mostly from Houthis, but it doesn't interrupt your daily activities. Sometimes you go to shelter if the alarm is close to you, but it's just 10 minutes and that's it. Of course, there is also, and I think you want to ask about it as well, the internal situation where Israel is divided, but it's not as divided as people think. Israelis are united on most of the things and are very divided on who should be in the government, as there are people in many countries. And you can discuss that over coffee or beer or good Israeli wine with people, but it's not something that plays a role during the visit. So I think it's very good to go to Israel now. It's safer than most places in Europe, and it's also very educative to go to areas around Gaza where the massacres happened a year and a half ago, or to the very north, to the kibbutzim that were evacuated for over a year. And you will see the resilience of Israelis, because you see the damage, you see the destruction, but you also see that people are coming back. You see new buildings, new houses, you see the plans for how the school will be better and bigger than the school before, where the new library will stand. So actually my most recent feeling from the visits to this area is very optimistic.
And what about the political situation, as you have mentioned? Because I have heard lots of Israeli people here in Prague. We were speaking, and I told them, we Czechs support you very strongly, but tell me something about your political situation. What about this Bibi and so on? And every time I can hear, oh, Bibi, we hate him, we don't like him. But now there is no time to criticize him. Is it the common idea in Israel now?
I think Israelis always like to criticize. So maybe they say this in Prague, but they don't say it in Israel. Bibi has his supporters. He will always have his supporters, and he's doing quite well in the polls. So it's not true that he is absolutely unpopular. But also, there are many people who would never vote for Bibi and who blame Bibi for most of what happened on October 7th and since October 7th. From some point of view, rightly; from some point of view, not so correctly, and they show their feelings. So I think Israel is, as it always was, and will be, a vibrant democracy where people are loudly disagreeing with each other.
So still divided country? No?
Sorry?
Divided country? No?
Divided country in a way, yes, but it doesn't. It still allows the country to go forward. In most areas, in most of the issues, it doesn't matter that the country is politically divided.
We are delighted to hear it. Thank you.
Well, first of all, if the elections were today, Bibi would be next prime minister, and if the elections are next year, as they should be, Bibi can be very well prime minister again. Okay, yes, that's the situation. But the other point is
for the seventh or eighth times.
Nobody else in the Israeli history has managed like him. That must be like it. But on the society side, okay, we Czechs are very, very homogeneous society. We are the same spread across the country. Even with a Polish minority in the northern Moravia, okay, it's just to count it, we are the same. Israel is extremely fragmented society, and it's not the fragmentation, it's not only if you like Bibi or don't like Bibi, but it's fragmented society of the Arabs and Bedouins and Christians and Muslims and Jews, and meaning Orthodox and those from Tel Aviv, etc. It's really, really something which, if you don't go through those cities and those towns, you cannot understand from here, because in Czech Republic, if you go to every part of Prague and every part of the country, you still see basically the same people. In Israel, you go for 1 mile and you are in a completely different world. So the division of the Israeli society and the fragmentation at the end creates very specific unity, which it's a contradiction in those terms, but this is very unique about the Israeli society. But
Michal?
Well, you know, I suppose I can only second this. It's a very strange phenomenon, and it has its empirical assessments. You know, you probably all know that for, I don't know, X year in a row, Israel comes up as one of the 10 happiest nations in the world, and for most people this
including after October 7th.
Including after October 7th, yeah? And there have been a number of books written about the Israeli resilience and the fact that in the moments of crisis the country is able to come together. And at the bottom of it is, and now I mean the Jewish Israelis, who are 80% majority of the country, at the bottom of this is obviously the shared story. You know, the shared story which has many ways of being told, in the religious sense, in the ultra-religious sense, in the secular sense, but it all comes back to the same history, same events, and same feeling of belonging. Yeah, and this is very precious, and we should not be confused by the fact that you rarely find two Israelis to agree on anything. I mean, this is not expected. This is the story of the 2 synagogues on a deserted island that we all know. There's one I always go to, and there's the other one I would never ever go to, and but that doesn't matter. You know, it's not what it is all about. So yes, Israelis, most Israelis I've met disagreed with their government, regardless of what the government was at the moment. But you know, I think the Czechs are not very different from.
And we are also among the most happiest, to the surprise of the Czechs.
90s, right? Yes, you're right.
That's right.
Jiří, vy jste chtěl něco? Pardon.
Yeah, first of all, I would like to, I was in Israel a week ago, and I have to confirm what Veronika was saying about the sense of security. we shouldn't mix up the media, images which tend to make equation between Ukraine in war and Israel in war. This is completely different situation. You can be dragged into a crowd of demonstrators instead of tourists. That's something which is there, So if you're coming with the train or a bus, then you suddenly see people with the flags, and you feel some tension, some political tension there. Israel has changed in an enormous way. And it is recognized by visitors as ourselves, but also by its citizens. I mean, the country, when we were there, it was 6 million maximum altogether. Now it's 10 million. Can you imagine that? Czech Republic looks like, inertia compared to that. And also, it's fragmented, but the fragmentation has changed. And the fragmentation has its representation in politics. And if I recollect the national Zionist leaders like Zvulun Hammer, for example, and I compare it to the leaders of the settler movement today, it's a sea change. I don't see politicians like Yossi Sarit when I was there, and Yossi Beilin. There are no politicians like there, and they are others. So there are changes, and it is recognized also by the citizens of Israel. When we speak to the last living friends Tomáš was mentioning of Czech origin, some say, this is not the country, I do not recognize the country. This is not the country we were building. So there is a change, and we should recognize it. It's just the other side of the coin. I agree the country is safe, I agree the society is resilient, but under the surface there is something going on, and we should watch it carefully. I would even say with concern.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I want to ask you if you have some question, but let me ask Anna for my last question. I want to ask you, where is the source of hope that the situation after October 7th will be happily finished or successfully finished? The microphone is there.
Well, happily finished situation in the Middle East is something which
it's naive. Okay, fine. Okay,
it is very hard to imagine. But if you look a little bit from far aside at the strategic situation, in a way, it's way better. Israelis wouldn't agree with me on the street because the feeling, as long as we have hostages, the feeling is of some part of the society is catastrophic. But if you look all around us, yes, we still have the Houthis. I don't know. I never understood the phenomena of this Yemenite attacks on us, and I don't know whether we will be, I mean the world will be able to somehow make them, normalize them. I'm not sure. But if you look at the other points, yes, the happy end didn't come, and I don't foresee it coming. But the situation in Lebanon is way better. Hezbollah, of course, it exists, but 80% of their military capability is gone. Again, Hamas in the south exists, but I don't know how to measure the percentage, but they are quite seriously hit, including, if you noticed a week ago, there were demonstrations against Hamas all over Gaza. And in Syria, I don't know whether it had to do with our war or not. The situation is not yet clear, but I think in some parameters better than it was a year and a half ago. Some parameters are still very worrisome, but it's not clear. So the situation strategically, I would say, is not bad, but I don't know when the happy end will come.
You know, when Messiah comes, the happy end comes.
I don't believe.
Okay.
Say you're Messiah, it can be someone else.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, the space and the time for you. We have some more 10 or 12 minutes. So if you want to add something, to comment on something, or to ask something, we will be very happy. Yes, please. Just be loud, please.
Good evening. My name is Wojciech Biba. I am a Prague chairman of the Young Civic Democratic Party. I have a need to have one remark and ask one question. I would like to defend a bit my generation because as a Prague chairman of the Young Civic Democrats, a few people, maybe not a lot, but a few people joined our association solely because our government stands on Israel. So I would like to say that, and I would like to ask possibly anyone who feels like answering how to speak to my fellow friends or people in my generation, not possibly the ones Her Excellency mentioned, the ones already under propaganda, but let's say the normal ones, the ones who have maybe like a neutral opinion, or they don't know about it, they don't know anything about it, they don't know what to think. Thank you.
Not only the neutral opinion, you mean, maybe.
Yeah,
I
ones
understand.
who don't know.
We understood. Michal?
I think there's a better recipe than to tell them what they think, you know, tell them to go, yeah, tell them to get a flight, which is 3.5 hours. It's not an expensive flight, and they will have an experience of their lives, and they will come back with a different perception if they have some misgivings about you know, Israel as a country. Not misgivings about individual events that going on, because everybody can have misgivings about that, but about the country.
Okay. Thank you very much for the question and for the answer. The other questions, please. Don't hesitate. Yes, Gabriel, just wait a minute, please. Please, it's necessary, please, for Veronica to hear it.
Syria, Israel, Turkey.
Turkey. We have forgotten Turkey. You did not? Yes, Veronica could. Maybe, why not? You are the closest person to Turkey now, so comment on Turkey, please.
Well, the question was Syria, Israel, Turkey, and
yes.
It is true that Israel is more worried about Turkey than it ever was. Turkey was an ally and friend for a long time. Then with Erdogan, it became more an adversary. But with the Assad gone in Syria and an instability in Syria, it means that Turkey can get physically closer to Israel. And this is something Israel wants to avoid. That's the reason for a buffer zone on the Israeli border, on the with Syria, inside the Syrian territory. It's also the reason for bombing of some of the military bases. So I hope one day Israel and Turkey will be good friends again, but I don't think it will be till Erdogan is gone. And till then, the Syria without enormous Turkish influence is an important buffer zone for Israel. Israel doesn't want to exchange Hezbollah as an Iranian proxy in Syria by direct presence of Turkey in Syria.
Thank you for this analysis, Veronica, very much. Other questions or comments? Yes, please, but wait for the microphone, be so kind. You can speak, please.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Matej Keka. I'm the president here in Prague of the Youth People's Party, so I'm quite happy that we have a colleagues here from the other parties. And my question is very much related to the question of my colleague and much more concretely to the social media. So how does the Israel as a country, how does the Israel as a country is using the social media in order to influence the perception of the young people or influence the picture of the Israel among the young generations in the world? Because we know, all of us, that the war is not happening only in Israel, but it's also happening on the social media about the perception of the people. So that's my question related to the younger generation.
Interesting question. Thank you for that. Anna, please.
I will try to answer, even though we don't have a good answer. We are working seriously on social media, not necessarily here, more in the more problematic countries, but you have to remember that our size vis-a-vis the people who are working on the other side, the number of individuals, the number of countries, the number of institutions who are working against us. It's not happening on its own. What's going on in the media? My first posting, like 150 years ago, more or less, was in San Francisco, California. And already back then, we had in certain universities in Middle Eastern, on the Middle Eastern faculty, you would have a Palestinian student who was studying for his BAs for 15 years. Because he was paid to study BA at a certain university as long as he was an activist on this faculty. We were warning about it for the last, I don't know, 40 years, but we don't have the same assets. A lot of money is flowing for this, including recently there are our kind of friends, but Qatari money is going into universities. So yes, we are fighting, but with very tough chances. And apparently we will get this year a much bigger budget for these kinds of things. And still I am not sure that we can overcome the sheer size of what's going on against us.
Michal, want to add something?
I think you can make this into a general case. You know, in my experience, you know, for the people who anti-Semites accuse of controlling all the media in the world and all the sources of information, the Israelis do a terrible job at propaganda. Yeah, but I think that, you know, more generally, free countries make a terrible job at propaganda because, you know, we don't believe the bullshit that propaganda spreads around. Propaganda is very cheap to us. Yeah, so I think you can add more money to your budget, and you can, you know, we know from our own experience our struggle against disinformation and the stories around it, but we haven't made much progress, and I don't believe you will.
But these days it's extremely important, because it's not only about us and the Middle East, it's about your region and
it's about the whole world, yes.
And Europe and all the big guys who are playing here political games online.
Let's give credit to Donald Trump and his administration, because what they are trying to do at the universities in US is incredibly positive, and I hope they will be successful, because they are breaking this industry of anti-Israeli hatred at the Ivy League universities and other universities in US, the system which was being built and paid for decades. Okay, so I don't give credit to Donald Trump for everything what he does, to put it mildly, but for this, they deserve credit and hope that they will be successful. Because if they are successful in US universities, it will spread also to European universities. As the anti-Israeli hatred in many cases did spread from the American universities to European universities?
It's hard to hear, but you're absolutely right. Thank you very much. Jiří?
Jakub, may I back to this?
Of course.
Not disagree, but just a caution. You're right that there's been made into industry, but my concern is: are we able to maintain a spaces for critical discussion in this world? And it's not just universities; it's media. I mean, it's all turning into shouting battles. And so, I mean, and here I'm not giving credit to Trumps and all these, because they are adding to this kind of, you know, shouting exercises. There is no critical debate. So, yes, some mechanisms of selling the hatred should be disbanded, but we shouldn't throw the baby out of the bathrobe, you know. And the baby is the critical discussion. And if you watch, for example, the Israeli media, there's a lot of shouting in Israeli media, but it's still a critical discussion.
No critical discussion at the American universities.
But one thing is critical discussion, the second thing is bullshit, as Michal said. And there is a big difference between it.
It's not only that, it's about the attempts to prevent a critical discussion. You know, what I think is the right thing to do in the American universities, unfortunately in some European universities as well, is to stop the students from heckling people who are trying to speak, from preventing people come to deliver a lecture to a university, for, you know, turning down furniture and computers and everything to prevent what university is supposed to do, yeah? And that's legitimate and should be done.
Okay, the last chance for you, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, of course, Anna, of course. I'm sorry.
Just to tell you that I'm trying to imagine any of my European colleagues, the other Israeli ambassadors, in a situation I experience here tonight, okay? When I get defense from all sides, when the questions are asked the way they're asked. I want to repeat something which I'm saying and boring people all the time. I'm probably the happiest Israeli ambassador on earth. So thank you.
Well, it's nice to hear. Thank you very much. So a chance for the last comment, for the last note. If there is no, thank you very much. Thank you very much. I think we will criticize Israel next time more. You know, 32 years. No, of course. 32 years ago, I was as a junior journalist in Czech radio, and I was making an interview to Ephraim Kishon, very famous writer. And I asked him, I thought I must do a strong question. I was 19. And I said, Mr. Kishon, why are you criticizing Israel so much? And he told me, oh, young man, because I love Israel. That's why I criticize it. And I remember this fantastic man and this great answer for my entire career. Okay, let me ask you for some last words. Some last words about friendship or partnership between Czechia and Israel. Veronika, I will start with you. And once again, thank you for this connection.
Well, happy to be here, and let's hope the friendship between Czechia and Israel will continue forever.
Thank you very much. Jiří, take the microphone, please.
I wish we will be able to deepen the mutual understanding in future, because it's needed, and not just go from the history. It's fantastic that we have this kind of historical roots, So we should continue in their tradition of. Masaryk was mentioned. I think Masaryk is an example of extremely sharp, critical thinker. So, and with all that, he actually made this kind of strategic decision that the small nations should basically support each other in their aspiration for self-determination. I think this is important in these times where the big nations try to dictate how the world is going to look. So for small nations, I think it's time to be strong together.
Be stronger and closer. Yes, Michal.
Yeah, I'd like to use this opportunity to mention a couple of people who maybe should be mentioned on this occasion, because this is the anniversary of the resumption of the diplomatic relations between the two countries. And for the 20 years when we had no diplomatic relations with Israel, there were several people of Czech origin in Israel who kept the flame alive, who remembered Czech history, who organized cultural activities to remind other people of their Czech origin. And they were people like Hanan Rosen, a former honorary consul general in Israel, Avigdor Dagan, whom we know as Viktor Fischl in this country, a wonderful writer, and also at one time Director General of the Israeli Foreign Ministry, Tatiana Hoffman, you already mentioned. So they also deserve credit for the happy state of relations between our two countries.
Thank you. Just skip, please, Anna, and I will give you the floor.
I think we must add Nathan Steiner, who was carrying the Czechoslovak flag, which is still our flag. So from that point of view, yeah, I'm looking forward to visiting Veronica in a few weeks. So I'm good.
Okay, thank you very much. The last word from you, Anna, please.
Well, I'm worse than even Michal, because I usually, when I am asked about why the Czechs are so supportive of us, I actually start at the wars after Jan Hus. So
Why not?
There is a logic to it, yes. But never mind. So if it survived so long, I think that I hope that we will find a way to overcome the true problem of the next generation. I hope that we will have some very good relations between the countries and the nations for the generations to come.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks to Veronika Kuchyňová-Šmigolová, Czech ambassador to Israel. Thank you, Veronika. Thank you. Bye. Big thanks to three former Czech ambassadors, Jiří Schneider, Michal Žantovský, and Tomáš Pojar. And thank to Her Excellency Anna Azari. Thank you very much. Thank you. Have a nice evening.